Hello to everyone. I want to welcome you into what is the first of a number of Advent devotional videos that we're going to be doing. We have a number of different guys that are going to be doing some short Advent devotional videos throughout this 2024 season. Throughout them, we're going to be looking at ways that Jesus is the true and better fulfillment of everything that we see in the Old Testament. On Sundays, we're looking at a number of people, but during the weeks, we're going to look at different people and institutions and things in the Old Testament. I'm going to be beginning today, this very first one, with Abel. Now, when you first say Jesus is the true and better Abel, many of us would say, well, what is really the connection between the two? But actually, we can see that there are a lot of things that connect them. First, both Abel and Christ were innocent. In other words, Abel was not put to death by his brother because of something he had done wrong. In fact, he had been commended by God, but then his brother put him to death. But of course, Jesus is true and better because he's not just relatively better as Abel was. Jesus is perfect. His sacrifice is perfect. We see that both Abel and Jesus were murdered, but of course, Abel was taken by surprise by his brother. He was tricked by his brother and unknowingly, unwittingly murdered. But Jesus tells us that he wittingly died. He had predicted his own death. He knew it was coming. And in John 10, 17, and 18, Jesus said, "No one takes my life. I willingly lay it down." Thirdly, Abel died because of his brother's sin. He died because of Cain's sin, but Jesus willingly took on all of our sin, not just one person's, but everyone's sin. So there is a distinction there that Cain's sin led to the death of Abel, but it was all of our sins that led to Jesus, and Jesus actually took our sin. And that leads to the final thing that is so distinct and different between them. It may surprise us, but if we remember in the book of Genesis, in Genesis chapter 4, in verse 10, the Lord comes up to Cain and he says, "What is it that you have done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." You see, Abel's blood was crying out that he had been wrongfully put to death, and it is crying out for vengeance. It's crying out for him to be avenged. But see, Jesus's blood cries out for our mercy. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 24 brings us up. You don't have to take my word. In Hebrews 12, as he's going through and talking about the worship that we experience, in verse 24, he says, "We've come to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and his sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel." See, notice what he says here. Abel's blood was speaking a word, but it was crying out to God, "Is my death, is my blood going to go unavenged?" But Jesus, taking on not just one person's sin, but all of our sins. Not just one or two sins you or I have done, but every sin we have ever done in thought and word and attitude and deed. Every one of these, Jesus takes to himself, but rather than crying out for vengeance against us, his blood speaks a better word. It speaks a word of mercy. So I hope as we're beginning this Advent season, this will be an encouragement to you and I. Brothers and sisters, we can be grateful. Jesus is the true and better Abel. He died for our sins, not because we surprised him, but willingly. And rather than crying out for judgment, his blood cries out for mercy today and every day. Take a moment and give thanks to God for Jesus, our true and better Abel. Have a great day. God bless.